Welcome to Muddy's Whitetail Watch. I'm getting ready to go out hunting this evening, and the spot that I'm going to is right on the edge of an area where a lot of does feed. And this is a really good spot for early in the rut. There's two places where you want to be. In the mornings, you want to be near the bedding areas where the does are most likely to bed. In the evenings, you want to be near the feeding areas where the does are most likely to feed. Try to keep the rut real simple. The bucks are looking for the does. So if you can spend as much time as possible around concentrations of does, those bucks are eventually going to be in those areas looking for those does. So like I said, you want to keep this real simple, but unfortunately, the actual hunt itself, the strategy is simple, but executing it can be pretty challenging. Anytime you're hunting around a lot of does, you have the risk of educating a lot of deer. So you have to be really careful in the way that you do this. In the bedding areas, you need to stay on the downwind fringe, and you need to approach that stand from the direction opposite of where the deer are most likely feeding, with the wind in your face. The very best way to set up, if you can, is in a tree or a blind where you have some kind of either terrain feature that you can drop off behind and sneak away, like maybe a ditch or a steep side hill where you can get out of the tree stand, climb down the back of the tree and slip off down the slope away from the deer. It's the same thing with your afternoon hunts around the feeding areas. The spot I'm going back to today is a blind on a narrow end of a 2-acre soybean field. So it's small enough that most of the deer that come out are ultimately or eventually going to be within bow range, but the downside is it's big enough that they're going to stay out there and feed. Sometimes if you get into really small plots or really small feeding areas, the deer will come out and browse around for a little while, then they'll move on, and you can sneak out of there pretty easily at the end of legal shooting time. This one's going to be more challenging. If we get pinned back there, we're probably going to call in the reinforcements and have somebody drive in with a vehicle and just drive past the edge of this food plot and bump these deer off. That way you get something a little bit more natural than us climbing out of the blind and spooking the deer that are close by. So the strategy itself is fairly simple, but the hard part is always getting away from these stands at the end of your hunt. So keep that in mind. You think, what difference does it make? The hunt is over. Well, it makes a big difference if you want to go back and hunt that spot again in the future, because every time you educate a deer, they're going to be less likely to move in daylight in that area. And even their body language, if they're non-target deer, may communicate to the bucks that you're hunting that there's some danger in that area. So do everything you can to keep from educating or bumping even a single deer during your hunts. This week should be pretty good. This is the week that I officially get going, and I'll hunt my mornings, like I said, near the bedding areas, my evenings near the feeding areas. Then as we get further into the rut, we'll talk about some different strategies at that time. Now I want to talk about some Muddy products. We started back at the very first Whitetail Watch talking about climbing safety. And there's no better topic to discuss, because really the statistics and my own experience suggests that the most dangerous part of any tree stand hunt is climbing up and climbing down from the stand. I've never had a really bad fall, but I've had 3 that, you know, were scary enough that it makes me realize that if you're not taking the proper precautions, it's not a question of if you're going to fall, it's just a question of when you're going to fall and how bad you're going to get hurt. So let's go back and talk about the 3 things that are most important for a tree stand hunter. You know, I've got my Safeguard safety harness on, super important. This is article number 1. Number 2 is Muddy's lineman's rope. And I use this when I climb up originally, the first time into the stand, to place the stand. That way your hands are always free. If you should slip when you're climbing in there to put the stand up, you're not going to fall to the ground. It really makes it a lot easier when you're climbing and when you're hanging stands. And then the third one is the safe line. This is, I think, the most important and most overlooked thing that you can buy. We have one in every single tree, and my employees, I told them that if they didn't use these, I was going to fire them. That's how important I think these things are. There's no better life insurance for a deer hunter than these safe lines. So once you get up and you get the stand set, using the lineman's rope to climb up so you're never unattached from the tree, you hang your safe line at that point, drop it down to the ground, tie off the bottom part. Now every time you go up or down that tree, you always snap your tether from your safety vest or safety harness onto that safe line, and you just slide the prusik knot up ahead of you as you climb. And if you slip, or if you should you know, step on something that's not an actual tree step and start to fall like I've done before, the system will stop you from hitting the ground. There's nothing you can do to make yourself safer as a deer hunter than to use this 3-part system. So that's it for this week. We'll see you right back here next week for the next episode of Muddy's Whitetail Watch.